We'll start adding context to our data by looking at the who. So some questions you might want to consider here are, what individuals do the data describe and how many individuals appear in the data? And that lowercase n that you see in parentheses there, that's the symbol we use in statistics for our sample size. So you'll see that throughout the class, and anytime you see that, it's just the number of individuals in your data set. All right, so why would we question what individuals the data describes? Here's an example of some research that was published a couple years back and had a lot of people asking, what exactly is going on here? So the research says drugstore pain pills are just as effective as opioids in ER patients. So my first thought when I saw that was, well, what about somebody that was in a really bad car accident or somebody that was in a burning building and has third-degree burns, right? That seems really unlikely to be true. And I'm not the only one who thought that. This research gave birth to a whole lot of memes along these lines. Things like, wow, this Tylenol completely resolved my pain, said no one ever. And so I dug into this research a little bit further. And what I found out was that the study involved a little over 400 adults. And specifically, the type of pain that was being treated was leg and arm fractures. Okay, and so that made a lot more sense to me. I looked at that and I thought that's actually fairly plausible that maybe ibuprofen could work really well for an arm or leg fracture. But what happened is people read the headline and then they started applying that to everything. So they started applying that to people dying of cancer, people with kidney stones, people that had second and third degree burns. Okay, and the way that statistics and science and research work is that you can only apply this to people that are similar in that nature to the people the original research was done on. So in other words, we originally researched people with leg and arm fractures here. So this research could apply to other people that have an arm or a leg fracture, but you can't, by the rules of statistics and science, just blindly apply this to every pain condition under the sun. Okay, so asking who is in that sample and will tell you really who those results apply to. All right, so another example of this are hemoglobin cutoffs for anemia outdated. So anemia, that's related to the level of iron in your blood. And so there's been, for a number of years, there's been kind of a movement to get these criteria changed, which on its face seems really odd. Like, shouldn't somebody have figured out by now, here's the ideal amount of iron to have in your blood to prevent some sort of sickness or illness? So it turns out the original guidelines were published by the WHO in the 1960s. And these guidelines are all based on white adults. So I did a little research into this, and the three most commonly cited pieces of research that gave the values for this cutoff are a sample of 700 people from Great Britain, a sample of men aged 15 to 21 from Norway, which is a super specific group of people to survey. That is odd. You would apply results to everybody based on just that small subset. And then a sample from Canada. And if you kind of dig into the demographics, you'll see the vast majority of people in here were white adults. So these cutoff values have been around for close to 60 years now. And really the only adjustment they've ever made is just basically for geographical reasons, because altitude can have an impact on the amount of iron in the blood. So the question then is, well, how do we know that these levels are appropriate for children? Or maybe pregnant women need a different level of iron in their blood for some reason, or maybe different races require something different. Maybe they don't. Maybe everybody can use the same cutoff value, but you don't know if you haven't actually surveyed a more diverse group. And so this is the reason there's a call for changing these values, or at least looking into researching that, because we do want to make sure that this really does encompass everybody and isn't just ideal values for white adults that we're applying to everybody. Okay, a couple other questions you might want to ask that are related to the WHO are, who wrote or published this information? What are their qualifications, and are there any conflicts of interest? And specifically for that one, I look at research that was published by Big Pharma, or maybe the researcher got grant money from Big Pharma. And so I'm looking for there to be kind of as unbiased as possible interpretation. Otherwise, if I do see those conflicts of interest, I read that research with a fine-tooth comb because I really want to make sure that maybe some of that bias didn't creep in there, whether consciously or unconsciously. So these are all kind of questions you want to ask related to giving you some context to the research you're looking at. All right, come back in the next video and we'll take a look at adding the what to the context.